Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back again to the NPTEL online certification course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. So far we have discussed about different methods, qualitative methods, quantitative methods. We also discussed about the advantages of mixed method, and very recent also we have seen certain sort of special method and its application in planning and architecture. Now in today's world, along with all such kind of testing of material, or you can say about innovation in building technology or different planning interventions, one thing is very common and people are emphasizing on that is on user perception, user behavior, user centric design. So in all such cases, what is happening? End of the day, whenever you come up with any product, if that product is not being preferred or used by the user effectively, then the purpose of creating that product is not that great, right? So we should have that kind of understanding that how people react to certain product, even if it is just a color of the wall, or it may be something like the size of the product. So in product design, it is very common. Nowadays, whenever you are using your mobile phone, you have seen that how the size and the shape that differs. Even whenever you just think about a cap of a bottle, then also it need to be understood that okay, what should be the size so that we can comfortably open it. Now, even for certain infrastructure, for built form, the behavior plays a crucial role. That how people behave to this particular location, how they experience it, and accordingly whatever the alternation they just suggest out of their behavior, which can be measured through structure questionnaire, it can be measured through certain experimental design. But effectively, if we can understand the behavior well and then you just modify your design, that particular planning will be much more fruitful and acceptable to the user in large. So keeping this background in view, today in lecture number 55, we'll be discussing very basics of research methods for behavioral study. So in this particular lecture, what we are going to discuss, what we are going to learn, we'll try to understand the human behavior and the relationship with the built environment. Then we'll also discuss about behavioral research methods that are available, and also I'll be discussing about very basic three, you can say the survey technique, or maybe you can say the way we get the responses for a questionnaire based survey, rating, ranking and the choice, because this is very commonly used in today's life, and how they are different to each other. Also we'll discuss about the ethical consideration, because whenever you are capturing the behavior, so definitely ethical consideration is required, because sometimes for your experiment you need some subjects as person, there also you need to take the ethical approval. And in some cases, if you want to do some experiment where some medical devices are used, so you need those kind of ethical approval from the medical board itself. We have discussed about that data privacy and this kind of data ethics in our one of the dedicated lecture. So you can, again, if you have not gone through that particular lecture, you can go through to understand the different types of ethical approval. And finally, we will summarize our understanding. So human behavior and built environment. So how they are related? The built environment impacts human behavior, the well-being, and the social interaction. Now you just follow this particular uh, conversation. Say hypothetically, just imagine one scenario that there is a road, beside that there is a footpath, the width of the footpath is quite big, and you find that some people they are playing some carom board on that particular street, right? There are certain sort of gatherings, some people gather over there and then just have certain sort of enjoyment, that people are playing carom board or people are playing cards, etc. So there is some social interaction happening, but at the same time you also find the pedestrian there just using that footpath. So this is some sort of scenario. Next, compared to that, you come to another scenario where you have the same road, you have the same widened footpath available, but there is no such kind of activity going on. It is just used as very much for the walking activity. So there is no kind of shops on the side of footpath. It's just a footpath. You just walk along that. Now, if you compare both of them, definitely you will have certain sort of opinion. Probably you don't like the one where you have those kind of footpath and only we are using for the walk and there is no other activity. You get some sort of disconnect, especially at say evening or night time. You also get a sense of fear because there is no other activity, there is no shop front, there is no such kind of sitting place, there is no other activity going on. Compared to that, if you see that something is happening, though it is sometimes create congestion, but still sometimes you can get a feeling that okay, I get connected because there are people, there are some shops front and some hawking activity going on, so it is something happening, so you can use that road safely. So this is nothing but the difference in the build form of the sidewalk facility. Now, for that, definitely it is going to impact the people's mind. Whether you want a social inclusion or social exclusion, whether you feel isolated or you feel involved in this particular environment. Hence, the built environment must be planned and designed with due consideration of users' behavior and preferences as well. Now, you may argue that whenever we ask people what they want, they can ask for something which is not practical or maybe which is very costly, which is not possible within that area or within that budget. Let it be. But if we understand that they, showcase that type of, facility or they want that kind of environment, so at least that can give certain sort of direction to the developer, and maybe within which whatever is best possible option that one can offer should go for it. Behavioral research in architecture and planning is the field where you can do all this experiment, as it can be done for the indoor facilities. It can be a study on furniture selection, it can be a study on the curtain selection, the color selection of the wall, or it may be like for the roadside activity, what kind of pedestrian environment that people think of, what kind of public open space that desire to have. So it can have application everywhere, right? So it is important in the field of architecture and planning to empower the designers and planners to create spaces that are responsive to the human needs and aspiration. Now, whatever is possible, whatever is in the budget, that is a different story. But unless otherwise you just make something, whether even you invest so much of money to create a public open space, but people are not using it. Maybe the reason is that the design itself, maybe the material that is not really soothing, even the material probably is getting heated in the daytime, or else it is something like which is very slippery, or it may be the landscape which is not giving a sense of security, so people are much more scared about those kind of design. So it is always better to have the people's on board and understand their preferences and perception towards the built form. Now for behavioral research, again we can do it in both way. We can go ahead with the quantitative research method, or we can also use the qualitative one, or sometimes if required, as we already discussed, by this time you know that even like with mixed method we can do excellent research. So in quantitative research methods, mainly the focus is on empirical analysis of the user responses, and the aim for quantitative research is to generalize the statistical findings to a larger population that is possible. The data collection can be done through survey, questionnaire, activity tracking, or even the travel diaries, that is specially for whenever you go for a transportation survey or the mode choice analysis or the route choice analysis, you can also take help of travel diaries. There are other methods as well we have already discussed in case studies. Now for the qualitative research methods, definitely in this case we can explore the in-depth user experience and meaning, and in this case also we can get much more exploration, and you can also provide the rich descriptive information through this qualitative research method. The data collection technique can be interviews, it can be focus group discussion, it can be like different sort of photography, videography, it can be the ethnographic approach that we have discussed in our recent case studies, where we have discussed the qualitative methods in detail. Now coming to the behavioral research method, common methods for data collection and analysis for behavioral research in architecture and planning are observational methods. In this case, the observation can be of like through photography, through videography, or insight. It may be something where you go for participation approach where you involve yourself, or it can be something from a distance users observe. There are different survey methods also, like you can go for questionnaire survey, semi-structured survey, etc. We can also set up the experiment that already we have discussed, that in this case the people's behavior or response to the indoor air quality or indoor temperature. So we can set up such kind of experiment and try to see that, okay, is there any relationship. Say for example, if you would like to study that the role of different sort of cloths and the temperature, like the materials and the temperature and the comfort, the human comfort, okay. So in that case you can also create such kind of closed door experimental setup, and you can change different parameters, and then you can observe how people are reacting to that, measuring some body vitals, and then you can also check their some sort of heart rate or other parameters. It can also be done through simulation, so different simulation we can apply, and also like definitely we can also go ahead with the mixed method. Now coming to the observational research methods for the behavioral research, the researcher collects data simply through observation of users' behavior. Now the first of its category is the direct observation. This can be done by watching or recording people's behavior in a location, in a space. It can be like something, some examples are mapping the movement pattern, the trajectory and all. So say for example, if you have one road intersection and you would like to see how people cross the road, whether they follow the zebra crossing available over there or they don't follow. So if you have a proper videography of that location, or else directly you observe over time, so you can find that okay, some people they follow the zebra crossing, but somebody may not. Some people they don't follow it and they just cross from here and there. So this mapping movement pattern is one, or it can be also something like you analyze the interaction, that what is happening. So you also have one concept in this called social force model. So you must have observed that suppose in an intersection you will find that you are waiting to cross the road because it is a busy intersection and the signal is red. So you don't dare to cross the road. But if you find that some people within the red signal also like attempt that okay, let's go, and then you follow, some people follow them, and then you will find that okay, even if the signal is not green to work, so people they are following it. Or else it may be like people they follow certain sort of movement of a two-wheeler, etc. So those can be done through direct observation. Coming to the next category, that is participatory observation, that I was mentioning in some of our recent lecture, that researcher actively engage with the subjects. So subjects means the respondent, and in this case we just joining the activity, we just work with that participants, we just try to observe the activity and all, so that it can give some more understanding about the behavior. And also in this case we can use certain sort of uh, prompts. So we provide some prompt, we just give certain activity and then try to observe. The third category is unobtrusive observation. In this case, studying the behavior without interfering. So people will not know that you are actually investigating you, because sometimes with this participatory observation, or even for the direct observation, if people notice that you are measuring something, right, you are measuring some vehicle spot speed and all, so people may behave differently. When you are with the participant they may act differently, but when you go for the unobtrusive observation, then we are not interfering and researcher are not interfering the participant, and in that case we can just simply do through analyzing CCTV footage. So nobody is actually looking at this, or it may be the tracking of GPS location. So that is something very important. So depending on the purpose of the study, we can pick up any one of them or maybe all of them as and when required. Coming to the survey methods, in this case it is the self-reported data by the users or their attributes or preferences and experiences through questionnaire or interview. So in this case quantitative survey, mostly in those cases we use the structure questions with standardized scale, that okay, you just ask to scale in Likert scale, or it may be just you say that 1 to 5 you state your importance, or it may be something like the choice, you give some alternative and then you just ask that with the given scenario which option you will select, and we do some statistical analysis to bring the inferences. Now for qualitative survey, mostly we go ahead with the open-ended or semi-structured interview, where the open-ended questions are used to gather rich narratives and interpretations. So it is much more than those kind of objective questions. So subjectivity are taken well care of in this qualitative survey. Now coming to the experimental method, in this case we just manipulate the variable in control environments to understand the cause and effect of the relationship. Now don't take the manipulating word in a negative sense, that altering data or something. Here the manipulation is nothing but changing the different scenario. As I already mentioned, say if you would like to do a study to see the effect of the material of a cloth that you wear and then the thermal comfort in a given scenario. So in a control environment you can change the cloth of the subject, or you can change the temperature, okay, indoor temperature, humidity, and then you try to record the details that at what particular scenario the respondent is giving a different feedback. You guess that they are not very comfortable with that kind of set of variables. The temperature is too high or the humidity is too high, then they react that okay, this kind of cloth is not very good for this kind of environment. So this can be done, this experiment can be done in field itself, or it can be done in the lab. So in field experiment, it is something where introducing changes in the real world setting, observing its responses. Say in this case, for example, adding a parklet to a street or introducing a bicycle lane or providing a fragmented open green pockets in a school or office building. So say for example, if you don't have any bicycle lane as of now for a given road, say for example, and you create a temporary bicycle lane and try to observe that people's behavior, whether now they are getting into cycle more, or whether like the cyclist will come to that lane, or still they are using the main road, they are not coming to this. It can be also like a street furniture that you installed, whether people will use it or it is not. So all this kind of experiment that you can do on field. It may be a simple experiment that okay, somewhere there is no zebra crossing, you just paint some sort of zebra crossing over there and you try to see whether they follow it or not, or still they just cross from here and there. So that can be done in the real world setting and scenario. But many a times it is not possible, because painting a zebra crossing maybe not seems like that costly compared to some other huge investment where you just use certain sort of vigilance, or you use certain sort of signal system over there. So for such cases, probably you can do such kind of experiment in a lab setup, and we just simulate the environment in control setting to isolate specific factors, like in this case the testing lighting effects on mood. So you just change the color, like definitely there is some sort of color psychology and the light. So sometimes if you just feel like happy with certain color setting, whenever you know you have low light or something, some different color, so it can also depend on individual that color they like, so that will change the mood, so which can be done in a lab experiment as well. Now coming to the simulation method, so this is very effective tool, because in this case the experiment is done through simulation, it's not you are exactly making it. So before implementing it, this can help you out to understand the people's reaction to it, and then according to the suggestions given or the feedback given in that particular setup, you can implement and upgrade your design. So in this case, experiencing planning or design proposals virtually through graphic, we can use the virtual reality, or nowadays very common that you can also go for the augmented reality tools, where before actually it is implemented, it is constructed, you can feel. So it is something like in architecture, you can compare it with the walkthrough that normally, you know, earlier days, like we did not have much software available. Computers were also like for certain sort of calculation, but graphic wise it was not that great. I'm talking about say maybe 20 years ago. But in recent times you find that there are software available, there are different plugins available where you can create some kind of hyper realistic images or the videos which can give you a sense of something, the building itself which is constructed. So earlier people, they used to make the physical model of the building, and then through that they try to get this kind of, you know, feeling that how this building will look like, or whether this space is looking congested or not. And also people like that time they used to draw those kind of perspective drawing and all. But over time, in last 10 years, there are so much of improvement in that kind of graphic design and all this animation. So there are n number of softwares available which can make realistic rendering, and then probably that physical model which has certain limitation you cannot explore, or it is maybe very costly, very few can make those kind of model earlier. Now we have change in both physical model and then the animation, because in animation and all this rendering we have so much of advancement. At the same time also nowadays we have the laser cutting machine and the 3D printer, which can also make those kind of very accurate 3D model. Now coming to that particular representation, the graphical representation and all, so you can see through the animation and then you can change. Even in the virtual reality, if you go with the metaverse and all, you can also experience that as if you are walking within that building which is to be constructed. So accordingly you can change the parameter, you can suggest it that okay, this is something, it's not good, I want this to be shifted there. So automatically through different options, even we'll discuss in detail in our coming lectures on application of AI and generative design, where you can alter all of them before it is implemented. So in this case, definitely if we try to understand little more on that, that is like the scenario planning. So in this case, exploring future possibilities and user responses through hypothetical situations. So we create certain sort of hypothetical situations, like maybe we just focus on creating a footpath without any street furniture, a footpath with so many hawking activities, and a footpath without anything. It's just a footpath. And then we just try to simulate that how people react to this. Okay, and accordingly we can understand different type of important aspect, and then go ahead with the base design which people they prefer the most. Alternatively, we can also use some sort of agent based modeling, where simulating behavior, the patterns of large group in virtual environment using different modeling software. See, there are certain sort of mega events happening, say Kumbh Mela, or maybe in Bihar the Chhat Puja. During those kind of 2-3 days, even in Kolkata Durga Puja, so few pandals and other things, there always be the attraction to the visitors. So all of a sudden there is a huge crowd. Even if we remove all this religious festival, even for some sort of international cricket match or maybe the IPL match. So after the end of the match, the outside of the stadium, you can just imagine the traffic. Okay, so many thousands people, they are coming on the road in a smaller duration. So how they disperse, how they just find their path and all. So this kind of agent based simulation model helps to identify. So obviously for simulation you need certain sort of base data. After that you just put it in the model to find out certain sort of control parameter, and then next thing is that you just change it. So you create another path and try to see that how they are distributed. So depending on different probability that you assign, things can move. Nowadays people use those kind of simulation software. Okay, even for crowd management they are using this agent based modeling in their study. Now coming to the mixed method, in this case we are combining different methods for more comprehensive understanding and also an increased reliability of the results. So definitely whenever you go ahead with the qualitative approach, probably you are losing some of the objectivity. Maybe you are exploring so many things, subjectivity is maintained, but objectivity wise it is little not acceptable. Now if you go ahead with the quantitative methods, probably you are just doing very well in terms of objectivity of this particular responses, but some subjectivity is missing. You combine them so you can balance it out. Somewhere you just do some sort of study where you capture the initial behavior through a field survey, and then you apply the simulation for further exploration of futuristic scenario which is not there. So it's a combination of your survey methods with the simulation method. So it is something, it is not like only simulation means you only need to do the simulation. Even for the simulation you need the base data, which you need some sort of survey or something, the secondary data which is already available. But combining them will definitely help for a better understanding and comprehensiveness of the findings. In this mixed method, definitely the triangulation is something very important. We have also discussed this is like one of the aspect of the mixed method in our mixed method lecture. In this case, definitely it help in validating the findings through multiple data source. For example, comparing the result of a lab experiment with field experiment and self-reported survey. So you have done some survey, you have done some kind of field experiment and lab experiment, and try to see that where they are conflicting or how much they are actually matching, because there are certain control parameter. You can understand whenever you want to create the real world scenario through simulation or through a control experiment, there might be some naturalistic thing which is missing. So even if you give a particular feeling of any subjects that okay, it is a driving simulator, you must have seen that in different shopping malls there is a game zone, and people, like normally the kids, they are playing, they are riding the bike or they are driving the car. Even if sometimes some of you must have played all those video games. So that is something also giving you some sort of controlled environment, some kind of scenario that you are driving on a hilly terrain or it is a plain road, whether it is like two-way traffic and all. But at the same time you know that this is a game. Okay, even if you hit badly, even if your vehicle is just falling onto the water, you will revive, you will get another life, but which is not the real case in the real life. So there might be some sort of differences in that kind of experiment in a controlled environment and then in the real field observation. But still, to replicate the experiment, to make it something like taste the proposed strategy for improvement before implementing it, if you want to taste it. So simulation is still a good acceptable model, and then we just compare that okay, in control environment people have this behavior, and in real time or in real scenario it is something different. So you can always change those parameters in your simulation to make it much more predictable and accurate. Now coming to the sequential mix method, in this case definitely in triangulation we compare and then come up with certain kind of observations. In sequential method, using one method to inform the design of another, so it is a sequence. So even in the mix method we have discussed it, right? So first you have done certain study on qualitative method, and then that findings will help to design the next stage of your quantitative analysis. So in this case also, using one method to inform the design of another, say for example using a self-reported survey to identify most critical factors to study in lab experiment. So through self-reported survey we identify these are the factors. Now you change the values of those factors in the lab experiment. Now in this particular case, unless you do this sort of survey or self-reported experiment with the user, you will not able to understand the factors. Alternatively, you can pick up from the literature, but that may not be contextual. So if you have done some survey, okay, these are few parameters that people said that they feel that these are the few factors which cause this. Now you take those parameters and then you try to see and manipulate the labels to create different scenario and test in a lab experiment. Okay, now coming to this slide, which is very important, that is about the rating, ranking and choice. Now whenever we try to capture the behavior, say how people feel about it, or maybe people's perceived importance or satisfaction towards any commodity or facility, we go for certain sort of survey, right? These three, rating, ranking and choice, they are very common. but we have to understand their uses and their limitations. Now, whenever we go for rating survey, so we just ask a person that okay, you rate your importance 1 to 5, where 1 is least important and then 5 is most important, and then you accordingly write. We have also discussed this rating scale, different type of scale in the measurement scale lecture, so you can also refer to that to get the type of scale. So in rating, it is nothing but assigning score or value to item based on predetermined criteria to indicate their quality, preference or satisfaction level, right? The advantage of rating is that it's very simple. Even if you have say 20 factors, you can rate them very easily. Compared to that, when you go for ranking, it is like some sort of ordering the item according to their perceived importance, preferences or superiority relative to each other. So for ranking, you need to compare others. So now if I give you 3 objects, like I just ask you that rank them. For 3 you can still do that, 1, 2, 3. But if I give you 20 such kind of factors and say that you rank them in terms of their importance, it's not very easy task. How will you rank them? So for that, the scoring or the rating is a better option. Then finally you convert that rating to a ranking. Now compared to that, the choice, in this case we are giving the options, you don't need to rate them. In this case, selecting one or more items from a set of options based on personal preferences, needs and also the constraint. So say I just represent some hypothetical scenario that from position A to position B, or maybe you can say location A to B, you need to travel. So you have option of bus, taxi, cycle, walk, and for each of them I am giving you the time that it will require and the cost. So based on time and cost function, definitely you may have a different priority. So we can ask you that rank your priority, that is one option, but again whenever you go for ranking for more than 5-6 parameters, it will be very difficult. So in such cases, we can also go ahead with the choice that out of the given options of transportation mode like bus, taxi, cycle and walk, moving from location A to B based on their respective time and cost, you just make a trade-off and then finally you select one. So maybe in that case you select bus is suited you the best. But in some cases you may say that the distance is not that much, I can also go by walk because essentially it can save the fare amount. So the choice definitely will depend on individual characteristics, but this is also one of the option that we use for our behavioral studies. So rating ranking choice can be done or adopted depending on the need and functions. So ranking is also important. Whenever you have limited number of factors, you can still go ahead with the rank or ranking as a tool, but rating is something where you can also apply for the large number of variables. And for the choice also, you cannot increase much more on the number of alternatives, because then you have to make the trade-off. Now for behavioral study, it is very important to consider the ethical part of it. The ethical considerations are very important. So ensuring informed consent and anonymity and also the confidentiality of the participant to be assured. Also the responsible data collection and analysis, so that the data privacy and data retention, deletion property, or maybe whatever is like the stand for that particular survey, that should be cleared out before involving the subject or the respondent. And also avoiding the bias, you should not prompt, you cannot force a person to say something for you or for certain kind of options. So you have to be very much careful, even if like when you represent the choice card or given the options, you should not prompt that okay, or give a hint that okay, this is the best option. You should be very much independent. The surveyor, the researcher should be independent. Ensuring the methodological transparency, that what method that you are using, so that is also very important, that consideration. Ethical approval from competent authorities wherever needed. So even if it is a medical science research, you are doing some sort of experiment on human, so you need that particular approval. If you want to apply it for certain age group, you need different approval. Even if you want to do something with say some government data and also you also need that sort of approval. Especially for the behavioral research, it is very important that if you target a particular community to be studied, you need those kind of ethical approval. So that we have discussed in detail in that ethical approval. There were several points that we have discussed, that different type of approval that you need to get for such kind of study, because it is not only for the study, even for later case whenever you go for publishing it, the publishers may also ask about those kind of ethical approval to get it published, right? So if we summarize this understanding, that we understood that the human behavior and built environment, they are very much linked. A good environment will give a better feeling to the person. At the same time, very shabby or very shallow design can make people depressed or deprived. So for that, all such kind of consideration to be taken to get the people's behavior preferences into the planning and designing of those built environment. We have also discussed about different behavioral research method, about the observation, simulation, mixed method, etc., and experiment as well. Then we have discussed about the rating, ranking and choice and their different applications. And also I discussed very briefly about the ethical consideration, especially for the behavioral study. So this is something very important lecture that we have. If you have any doubt further, please do write in the forum. I'll answer that. These are the further reading, and with that we conclude this particular lecture. Then we'll move to a new lecture where we have just initiated the discussion of simulation based studies in planning and architecture, because it has certain benefits. If we can carefully use it, so definitely it is very much beneficial. So with that, I stop here, and we'll be meeting in our next lecture with this simulation based studies in planning and architecture. Thank you for joining.